Welcome back, scholars. In this video, we're going to be discussing the story Fleur by Louise Erdrich. Here on the screen, we have a artist representation of Fleur with watermen. It was first published in Esquire magazine, the August 1986 edition. Now, this story is an example of magical realism. Right? Magical realism is where you have a story that takes place in the real world, but there are elements of magic intertwined. And here we have mythology and the supernatural all throughout. Fascinating story. It's a story that has a lot more going on than what's on the surface here. And Erdrich uses the technique of magical realism very often in her work. Now, the title character, whose name is French for flower, is said to be a consort of the water devil. And here's an example. Here's an artist rendering of him. She is drowned twice in Lake Turcotte. Here is a photo of Lake Turcotte in Quebec, Canada. Both times the men who came to rescue her, came to her aid, died mysteriously. Okay. And you should like put a pin in that thought, put a little post-it note next to it. The final man, George Manywomen. Do I really need to point that out? Yeah. George Manywomen drowned in his bathtub. When he found her half drowned on the shore of Lake Turcotte, she came to and looked at him and said, "You'll take my place." And so he stayed away from water as a result of that. These folks living very close to their legends and superstitions, and with good reason, because her body count was 2 already. The guys who pulled her out of the lake, one walked in front of a car, the other wandered off and just disappeared and died. Well, George Manywomen winds up slipping in his brand new bathtub that his sons bought him, knocking himself out and drowning there. Right? Now, here's the thing. Let's see. Yeah, the water monster, rather, is called Meshipishu. He's a seducer. Right? Let me go back to the picture of him here. Meshipishu. When he appears with green eyes and copper skin. He says he's handsome. You'll find him enticing. But the mothers tell their daughters, once he has you in his grasp, he'll change into something monstrous with claws and horns. He'll exude these crystals that will turn into mica on your chest, and he will drag you under. He said he holds young women under the water, taking the body of a lion or a fat brown worm. Okay, you may see the Freudian phallic implications of that, and essentially, and to drown them. Essentially, he is a cautionary tale to protect women from young Chippewa women from sexual assault, from rape. Statistically speaking, indigenous women are more likely to be the victims of rape than any other group. Here's the graphic on the screen from 2001 to 2015, and you have them Aboriginal female homicides versus non-Aboriginal female homicides. More likely to be missing, 12 times more likely to be missing or murdered than any other group. More likely to disappear. It is a national epidemic both here and in Canada, and no one seems to be able or willing to do anything about it. Okay. Now, what makes Fleur different in this story? She refuses to drown. She's been drowned twice and come back. You get the implication here being that she's been assaulted, and they dumped her body in the river or in the lake to try to hide it, and she recovered both times. So folks on the reservation think she's something wicked because she just won't die. And as a result, they come up with a number of stories about her, including that she's a skinwalker. They say that she hunts at night, and we can tell because we followed her bare feet tracks in the snow until they turned into animal tracks. Now, there are clues as to what's going on here. She refuses the old women's advice. She dresses like a man. She becomes an outcast from society. And think about that. Throughout history, women who have not fit in or who have been victimized in some way, and through the trauma kind of withdraw from society, or their behavior falls outside what we had previously thought of as the norm, they become marginalized, looked down upon. And such is the case with Fleur. And people began to, because she doesn't meet these cultural standards, people began to look at her strange, and they think she's a witch, a skinwalker. And so she leaves the rest for Argus just about the time everybody's deciding to get together and run her off the place. Argus is a small town not far away. And that's where our narrator, Pauline, picks up the story. She's a young Native American girl who's been pressed into service by her stepfather after her stepfather's name is Dutch, and her mother died about a year after Dutch brought her down from the reservation. And so, in her words, Dutch took me out of school to take her place. So she cleans house and spends the rest of her time working at the butcher shop, but if you read the subtext there's probably a lot more implied in what she was doing. And later on she says, because I could fade into a corner or squeeze beneath a shelf, I knew everything what the men said when no one was around, and what they did to Fleur. So we have these two indigenous women here in a world populated almost exclusively by white men in this butcher shop, and except for Pete and Fritzy, who are the butcher shop owners, and they're just kind of secondary presences. Even toward the end of the story, they take off and leave the place in the care of these three guys because it's August and it's getting hot. Right? So the men never really saw Fleur for what she was or what was special about her. Rather, they saw her as a threat to be conquered, mostly because she dares to enter their world, and because she can beat them at their own game, namely cards. Mm-hmm. Tension begins to build here because Fleur keeps winning. And Lily, that name is pretty significant, not only because he's pasty white, but also because, the white man is kind of the victimizer here. Doesn't think that women are smart enough to play cards. Right? And then one scene he uses a pejorative term. He says, well, it's clear that the squaw can't bluff. So we're not supposed to like Lily or Dutch or any of these guys. They're largely one-dimensional, and they're very unlikable characters. So the tension slowly builds because Fleur keeps winning. Always $1. She doesn't take them for all they're worth. She just keeps winning $1 every time. She shares a confidence with Pauline when she asks Pauline to stake her. And after she's won her bet, she happens to grin at Pauline, this big wolf-like grin, she says, that the pillagers use on their victims. Only I wasn't her victim. He also gives Pauline the revelation that men will never see her as her hardship has stolen. Pauline's hardship has stolen her looks. She says her dress hangs on her like an old woman, and her skin was craggy after her eyes were sore, reading, taking care of her mother who was ill. Fleur, on the other hand, is a beautiful, good-looking woman, and capable, although all the men stay away from her because they fear the wrath of the waterman. Okay, so one night after the game, Pauline has fallen asleep in a pile of sawdust there that they keep around the place because it picks up stains and picks up liquids and from the butchering. And she's the beneficiary of a great act of kindness from Fleur, who picks her up and rocks her gently and places her in a closet on some old ledgers, which will serve as a mattress. Fleur pays her back the 8 cents that she staked her, plus 32 cents more. Keeps the rest of the $1 for a stake, she says. That is a S-T-A-K-E, like a stake in cards. And so it's almost as though Fleur is the only one who sees Pauline. Yeah. Well, eventually things come to a head. Fleur somehow consistently winning $1 every time. So the guys set her up, and they think, well, yeah, we'll get her this way this time. But she wins anyway, and this infuriates the men. They can't stand it because she's beating them at their own game. She is essentially taking away their power. Well, this infuriates the men, of course, and so they try to get her to go another round, but she refuses, and so they go into Pete's stash of liquid courage and get drunk, and then they go after her. They chase her. Ironically enough, and perhaps this is a bit of magical realism itself, it is a sow that impedes Lily in his attempt. And make no mistake, hogs, they seem docile and slow. They're incredibly smart, and they can be incredibly mean. Pigs will devour anything you throw in their pen all the way, just completely. Yeah. And so it is the sow, actually, who clamps down on Lily's shoulder on her teeth and won't let him get away. But he eventually does. She finally spits him out in disgust, according to Pauline. Now, the description of what happens next is pretty vague, but with regard to what the men do, but let me just spell it out for you. This is a rape. It is a brutal physical attack. The men are weak and defeated and angry, and so they take out their frustrations on her physically as a means of regaining their power, regaining their strength here. Okay. It's not about sex, it's about power, about them dominating this woman. The men were drunk and angry because she beat him at cards, and so this is their means of putting her back in her place, as it were. Now, in the final act, we have the coming storm, and this is perhaps a bit of magical realism, because in the introduction of the story, Pauline says that Fleur couldn't decide who got the worst of it, of Fleur's wrath, whether it was the town or the men. So she comes back to work, and Fleur's nowhere to be seen, but the men are sitting around there, and they're all drunk and hungover. And so she's outside and sees the fingers of a tornado reaching down. She calls them witch's teeth, which is crass, but a very, very apt description of this. The finger of a tornado reaching down onto the ground. So she runs, tries to, calls out her stepfather first, or anybody else, any of the other guys, and can't find them. And finally she figures out that they've gone and locked themselves in the meat locker. Again, Pauline's been invisible to them. She's not even a second thought. Her safety is not a consideration for them. So they just run and lock themselves in the meat locker. And then she hears a voice, a high, keening scream on the wind that tells her what she should do. Okay. And so what she does is she runs the lock on the meat locker with the men inside. Now, Pauline gets blown around, but she's somehow spared. And as fate would have it, the Costco's meat, the butcher shop where they worked, where Fleur worked, takes the worst of it. All the outside, the boards in the building are blown away and piled up in a pyramid, a rough pyramid. The candy counter is blown several hundred yards away and just set down, undisturbed, as if someone had just picked it up and gently put it back down. Equipment's all over the place. And it's about this time that they figure out, hey, we got 3 people missing. Now, they were all single men, as it turned out, and so there was nobody to really look for them. And so the folks start excavating Costco meats to try to find it. And they're about to break, and there is some discussion of breaking into the meat locker, but they say, wait, no, don't do that. It's still intact. We want to keep that. So they clear away the debris, and they pry open the door, and they find the 3 men there, and the dog, the mean little dog of Lily's, sitting around a barrel dressed in bear skins, and they're all frozen solid. Okay. Yeah. And that is a measure of justice here. Okay. See, Fleur, Pauline was unable to help Fleur the night of the attack because she was terrified. She was frozen with fear. But she took back her power and also got some justice for Fleur when the tornado came. Right? And the retributive justice here of the men freezing to death in this freezer, where oddly enough, with their card game right there on a barrel in front of them, was how the story ends. And the thing about fiction is you can get a little bit of justice in fiction a lot easier than you can in life, in the real world. So I think what Erdrich is doing here is she is writing a story about justice and about retributive justice for not only her protagonist, but for all the indigenous women who do not get it. Now, of course, this is a magical realism story. And pardon the frozen man image here. And so we end with a description of the pillagers, Fleur's people, and about their strength and their power. And in this dream, we have Pauline recovering some of her courage here. In the dream, she is able to stare back at the men and the Fleur in a way that she couldn't in life. And she says there is the old men talk about, well, let's see, she still sees Fleur in her cabin down by Lake Turcotte. And she was there last year when Fleur gave birth to a copper-skinned, green-eyed baby. Now, remember, the waterman is said to have copper skin and green eyes, and the baby smiles in her sleep as if she knows something that the others don't, and knows something that all the whispering and voices in town about Fleur, the ones who tell their stories, doesn't know. And she says that none of the old men get the story right. They don't even get the middle right. Now, this being a magical realism story, leave it up to you. Is the child the product of rape, or is it the child of the waterman that Fleur is said to be married to? Well, that's the great thing about magical realism. It's all up to you, all up to the reader to decide when ending is best for you. So I'll leave you with a quote here from Louise Erdrich herself. Life will break you. Nobody can protect you from that. And living alone won't either, for solitude will also break you with its yearning. You have to love. You have to feel. It is the reason you're here on earth. You are here to risk your heart. And I think that probably applies to Fleur here, because she is no longer in solitude at the end of the story. She has Pauline, and she has that magical baby. All right. Well, that's it for now. I'll see you in the next video.